Welcome back to Longterm, a podcast where we're talking about a lot of recovery from a lot of different things. And so whenever you hear the word recovery, it can be for substance abuse, addiction, but there's also recovery from a lot of things that can happen to you, as we've learned along this show, is that trauma has a huge part of that, and something that we all have to recover from in order to live our best lives or achieve the most of our futures, right? I'm Ti King, and with me today, I think, is probably the most knowledgeable person on the subject matter of abuse that I could possibly ever think of. And so you happen to live in the same state, and I happen to have built your website a long time ago. So I was glad you were in town so that you could catch a seat here on the podcast and talk about your story, because it's so I think impactful, but also you are not ashamed of talking about your story, but also you do that to help people.
Yes.
And like everything that you've done, from your books and the movies that you're getting produced, and all of your work as a human being is to help other people that are in that situation that you've been in to come out of it. Or to help, bring justice to people that were causing this to happen to other people. So, Cae Cordell.
Thank you for having me, Ty. It's an honor.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm honored to be here with you and talking about this. Known of your books for a long time and read them a few years ago when we were, building your website for you. Yeah. So I really just kind of want to get into it because there's so much that you have to share, and you have so much, knowledge and experience, and something that I think everybody kind of needs to hear. One that, and we'll get more into this later on, but one is that everybody's experienced something at some point, and it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to deal with it, and we kind of have to deal with it in order to live a healthy life going forward. So I want to talk with you. I know you're an author. You are so many different things, and we'll get into those other projects that are coming up. But at 78 years old, let's go back to the beginning.
Well, in 78 years, I'm also a lifelong minister since 16,
Mm-hmm.
and I do chaplain work, and I do volunteer counseling for sexually abused victims. And going back to the beginning, I was born in Kingston, Arkansas, Madison County, grew up with a mother, father, brother, and 3 uncles who sexually abused me. And my father, both he and my mother were sociopaths. And I would dare say he was paranoid schizophrenic, possibly bipolar, and a lot of personality disorders. And as a child, you think it's normal, but it wasn't, Ty. It was abnormal. And I had an older brother, a younger sister, and a younger brother. None have had a normal life. Mm-hmm. My brother, dad, mother, and the 3 uncles are now deceased, which is a great relief to me. But trying to process as a small child, you question, who am I? Why is this happening? Is it my fault? Did I do something to cause this? Why did they hate me? They blame me for everything. If the cow fell in the ditch, it was my fault. If it rained wrong, I was at fault. And as a child, you grow up with very little confidence living in that kind of situation. And I always ask, God, where are you? I never blame God. And this is the point of this we'll discuss later, is God had absolutely nothing to do with what was happening to me as a child. These were grown-up choices made by adults who themselves were wounded people. Mm-hmm. And it starts, I've done a lot of inquiry into my family, different family members, and incest goes back on my mother's side 6 generations, or farther, and the same on my dad's side. And this is a generational learned behavior. A lot of people today are calling everything curses. I don't go that route. I think it's a learned behavior accepted and handed down through trauma bonding with the person abusing or the family that is abusing. it becomes acceptable for the next generation. And that's what's happened in my family.
Mm-hmm. When you say it goes back 6 generations, do you mean like it was consensual back then, but then devolved into something more sinister?
It was sinister from the beginning. It's always covered up. Death threats were given. It's your fault. And I mean, that's what was horrifying when I go back and I talk to 2 or 3 generations of cousins. And they said, well, we were abused. Our dad abused. And grandpa, great-grandpa, I had an aunt that was a clinical psychologist, my dad's oldest sister, and she told me that it went back as far as she knew. And her grandfather, my great-grandfather, and his grandfather molested, family members, uncles, and they came on down and have molested cousins.
Wow.
And I've got third cousins who have lived because of the abuse their mother or father experienced. They abused them or married someone that abused them. And unfortunately, I think I had one therapist that told me, she said, I believe abuse victims experience and put off a pheromone that abusers, pedophiles smell. And I told her, I said, I don't know where I'd agree with that. But I said, I think it's how that we react in public. I always was very shy, always walked looking down, couldn't look at anybody. So I was easy pickings. And I don't know how many times as a child that I was approached by pedophiles. And I thought, what is wrong with me? Wasn't a thing wrong with me. It's personal choices by these men. And then I grew up, taught for a college in a medium security prison, which we could talk about later. And the biggest percentage of the inmates I worked with were sex offenders. So I did a counseling class at night for they had to take this counseling class to be able to get jobs or on their way out of prison. I learned so much, Ty. And it was so, my eyes were open and I thought, oh my, this is why this happened as a child. And one thing that came out of that was the ownership. So many of them expressed in therapy. I had about 35 men every night working with them. They owned their victims, whether they knew them or not. Their victims provoked it. They asked for it. They dressed provocative, or they were in love with me. 10-year-old children, 8, 9-year-old kids in love with a 40-something-year-old man? Absolutely no way.
Right. Exactly right.
And so that started opening my eyes. And then I went back, graduated Arkansas Tech, went back and graduated Boise State University. And I started taking all these courses in communications that mine was directed toward abuse and learning how to have talk therapy. And I started learning all these things and I'm thinking, whoa, this is really real. There's things out there, but there's still not enough studies done to explain the abuse that's been 6 generations in my family.
Right.
And that's why I wrote the counseling book. But also my life story, Redbird Phoenix, I came to the conclusion, Ty, that if I could speak out, I hope to inspire worldwide the idea for women, girls, boys to step forward, men, and say, Pedro, John, Paul, Ralph, Hank, Joshua, Jacob raped me. Let's name it for what it is. It's not incest. It is rape.
Yeah.
And that is why it took me a long time. When I first wrote the book you read first, I was terrified. I turned those first 2 books you read into Redbird Phoenix. And I just knew my dad and mother, even though I was in Idaho writing these books, I just knew they were outside the window watching me write and were going to kill me in a minute. So I want to expose the fear, educate the public.
Right.
We don't have to fear these men or women. Women are sex offenders also. We don't have to fear. It's the public opinion that is causing the fear.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it kind of makes us afraid to talk about it too because of those social norms where it's like we don't talk about that in public.
It's a hush hush.
Yeah.
Don't tell.
Right. But yet, like you said, you're living in fear of, the people that victimized you.
And as long as we live in fear, we're giving those people who raped us landscape and real estate in our mind. I refuse to sell any real estate to my abusers. I'm debt free. I don't owe anybody anything of my past. I finally worked so hard to make sure I was healed, and the real estate in my life is not for sale anymore. I've evicted them.
Love that concept. Your mental real estate.
Yes.
Who are you letting live there? Who's camped out on your real estate?
That is what's happening by every
Yes.
person who is afraid to talk about, and they're owned by the person who raped them. Even though he or she may be dead, they still own their future. They're still camped, or they still have a house in their head.
Yes.
And that's why I talk about the God house in the counseling book. When rape occurs, we have a special place. I explain it as at creation, God put a place that only He is supposed to communicate with us. That's the God house. When rape occurs, that God house door is slammed open. Like you see cops taking the big bar and breaking down a door.
Yeah.
That's what rape does to a trauma victim that's been traumatized. That place that's supposed to be pure and perfect, we are supposed to have a choice when we decide we want to have sex first time. I don't care as a teenager,
Right.
as a young woman or young man, we wait and hold ourselves in purity. That's our right. However we do it, it's wrong. I consider it wrong to do that and don't encourage it, but it's our choice. What a rapist does is takes our choices from us and our rights from us. Well, I've determined there is a scripture in the Bible where God is talking to the Israelites and tells them, look, yeah, you've been bad boys and girls, but I'm telling you, you can take back what the enemy has stolen. And so I've declared war on my enemy of the past, and I'm taking back the territory that should have been mine as a child.
Yeah.
My right to that real estate.
Love that concept. That's amazing.
Well, that's what I've learned.
No, that's a good lesson for all of us, no matter what it is. I mean, that you've experienced or you're.
Well, trauma carries so many different variables than just a rape, incest, and sexual abuse.
Of course.
Domestic violence. There's all kinds of things in the marriage that can traumatize our children.
Of course.
I saw in my children diagnosed with the food addiction, nervosa, you have to direct that. And over sexuality, our anger, children never deal with, unless you can come out as a grown person and say, I was sexually abused by uncle, cousin, stranger, dad, grandpa, you will never get over it.
Right.
You have to name it. And so many stifle it down inside, choke it down, and blame everybody else. Anorexic nervosa is a problem with so many abuse victims. It's a thing that's out there. They've had a lot of study on that. Suicide is one of the side effects of it.
Right.
And it's so, they either get overweight or they get underweight, and they always blame someone else. They never blame the perpetrator. They never look. I was abused is what's causing this brokenness in me. And until they can own that brokenness and say, yes, it happened, there is no recovery. They will deal with it, go through marriage after marriage, partner after partner, in sexual relations that are very unhealthy.
Sure. Well, like you said, these are learned behaviors, generationally too. So like you said, how much it affects the child, they're learning from the parents.
Yes.
Who, no matter what you're putting out there. So whether it's good, bad, neutral, and they may not even know it, but they're exuding those same actions, or it affects them somehow. Yeah. My mom, I grew up with an abusive father, and my mom was the victim, and I saw her, get beat many times. And then we would go to battered women's shelters, and we would stay there for a while. Then he would say, I'm sorry, miss you, da, 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 da. We go through the cycle of abuse. But growing up, then I started falling into, all of my relationships were with people that I allowed to just run straight over me. And like, I was just
He was a
so submissive.
pacifier.
Yeah, pacifist. And so like, my mom says she worries that, in trying to make us not like my dad was, so aggressive and abusing people, that she actually, made us too much.
The other way.
Yeah, the other way. Yeah,
I
exactly
worry the
right.
same thing. I know that my hang-ups, I tried to not let those affect my children, but I know they did. I'd be lying. I'm not going to lie. Yes, they affected my children and still do today. But the thing I will not, and I will ask every woman out there, if you fought for your children, if you fought everything as I have, put every effort in to recover and protect them, you have to start setting boundaries.
Right.
To say you can only come so far. You can't blame me for the abuse.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm learning to do even today is I have to set boundaries. And it meant that I had to walk away from my 2 older children because there's just so much the real estate I've got to lease out, and I canceled the lease on all that. And so I have a right to have a life.
Yeah.
I have a right to be free of their anger.
Exactly.
And they won't direct it at their dad. It's all directed at me. But I've set those boundaries, and I won't let them cross it because I don't want to be unhealthy. And I worked hard to get healthy, and their unhealthiness, now they have to live with it and deal with it. They're up in their late 40s, 50s, and I'm no longer responsible.
Right.
And I encourage everyone, we have to learn what is healthy. If you've never had counseling for abuse, there's very few good counselors here in Arkansas, sad to say. There is a good clinic in Conway. It's called, I think it's Family Life. They do really work with the victims. That's the only one that I can send people I work with. I don't work with children. I work with adults. And children need help. They need to face, not patted on the back and say, yeah, when they say, well, mommy's responsible because daddy did this. No, you got to say, no, dad was responsible. Mother was a victim also.
Right.
And so many counselors nowadays are being trained, pacify the victim, get your money, and keep them pacified until you can get, they can move through. They never recover.
Right.
I see it every day.
So when you were a child, you were going through all this abuse, and that was what, the 50s and 60s?
I was born in 47, and I started school in 51. Graduate. Well, I started school in, I guess, 53 because graduated 65, and that abuse was consistent.
Right.
And what was sad was my dad was a violently hated man. He was claimed to be a pacifist and was a draft dodger in the 40s. And that's when the FBI picked him up, and he was arrested and went through federal court and convicted of being a draft dodger. And all that was all hush-hush. And I've got the paperwork. I dug around at Tech Library and got old newspaper copies of all that and was able to read about his dad and mother were arrested, and they agreed to go to Illinois, and they went up there and worked through the entire war at a war factory and to avoid jail. And my uncle, he never told his family. They didn't know anything about it. I mentioned it, and I thought, oh boy, I've opened a hornet's nest. Yeah. He was one of my abusers.
Wow.
And they claimed all this, that they were all of God, but they did everything in the name of God. If we did something wrong, God was mad at us. And my oldest brother, before he died in 2018, businesses wouldn't even allow him to come in. He was, the only word I have been able to come up with in the description is a total infidel. Hated God, had no God faith, and would curse God. And if he saw a woman in a business, he would start sexually describing her in any business he was in, out openly, crudely. And so I spent several hours in Madison County meeting with various people, letting them talk to me about what happened to them through the verbal abuse and the verbiage that was used and how ashamed they were and how it traumatized them. And he had to leave Madison County in the end to even grocery shop. Walmart wouldn't let him come in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was
Wow.
just nasty-minded. Filth rolled out of his, and my mother was the same way. It was just filth after filth. And I heard nothing but filth and sexual talk, bestiality, till I left home and was forced to watch things. And my brother was forced to join her to survive in abusing me. He was 9 years old.
Wow.
To have food, if he did what she told him, he got food.
Yes.
And I starved. And because of that, when I started school, all the students hated me because of my dad. And my first grade teacher disliked me and made it very obvious. And the kids were allowed to bully me. I would stand and wet my pants out of fear. And then she'd make me stand with my ring and a chalk ring on the chalkboard till my pants dried. But I knew it wasn't my fault. There was something in me, no matter how bad it was. I wasn't going to let them murder that good part of me, and I didn't.
Right.
And I felt so bad for the teacher years later. After I came back home in 2006, I went up and the teacher saw me and she said, "Was that bad of a teacher?" Here she is, 90-something years old.
Mm-hmm.
She was the first person that taught me to respect the Bible out in public. She had it on her desk. She read from it every day. Here's this teacher who hated me, yet I think her conscience might have been bothering her. You know what I told her? I said, "Honey, you worked with what you knew, and I'm proud that you were my teacher. Why would I upset her and destroy her at that age?" So I answered her as kindly as I could. And she did a lot of good. She taught. Her husband was abusive to her. I didn't know. I learned that later and had things from family that I won't expose, told to me in private. And I felt terrible. I thought, here you were being verbally and mentally abused at home and run around on, and you were trying to survive. We don't know under the face and the facade of another person. We never know, Ty, what's behind their pain, what's behind their anger, what's behind their shutting us out.
Not everybody suffers in public.
It is.
Right.
I developed agoraphobia and I was diagnosed. I'd soon hide. It took me a long time to be able to talk like this. And you were an important part of that, Ty, when you helped me.
Thank you.
You believed me. And that was to believe when someone comes to you and says, "This is my story." That is, you're giving them a gift of, you can't even pay for that kind of gift with money.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to do with what I'm doing now, is give that gift to the public. Us expose these perpetrators. I've worked with families who was a doctor. I've seen lawyers. I'm sure there's judges, state legislatures. I've worked with I don't know how many churches on outing pastors and deacons, Sunday school teachers who are raping within the church. That's part of the expertise, and that's why I wrote When Forgiveness Isn't Enough, the counseling book. I got case after case in my files that I've worked on through the years. And I went after the Pentecostal Church of God publicly and the Assemblies of God publicly. And I have no shame in doing so. And I'm willing to fight and keep fighting. And I can name publicly who they were, and I'm not doing that right now.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't have any fear. When you were a kid and you were, let's say, like when the teacher was doing that to you in the classroom, and I mean, I guess everybody sort of knew about your dad. Were you his only victim at the time? No.
He abused every one of us children, and so did my mother.
Oh, wow.
We were all victimized. And that's with my brother. He grew up and he had an offer of a scholarship to the University of Arkansas to play basketball. I heard my dad call the principal of the school come up, the superintendent of school. He took him outside and he told him, he said, "My son is too dumb. I need him on the farm. I want you to tell him he can't go and accept that scholarship."
Wow.
And I watched that principal through the door give my brother a beating and tell him he was stupid and that he was too dumb to go on to the University of Arkansas. Then the town took it up. They would torment him, make fun of him, grab him in the crotch and squeeze his testicles till he'd scream and scream. This went on all of his life.
Wow.
And that kind of abuse, he had no room to look to God. From 12 years old, he was the lost soul. And
course.
he married a 16-year-old girl, and he was 26. And he had 3 children. They did not escape the abuse.
Mm.
And it's horrifying.
Right.
It breaks my heart. My youngest brother, when he was 17, asked me, was I his real mother? How I wished I could have been, Ty. But I never could go back and get him. I went back when my sister graduated high school, and I told my dad, I said, I'm taking her, and you're not stopping me. You're going to loan me your pickup to haul her things to my apartment. And I took her out of it. And she's had a semblance of a half normal life. But my brothers never have.
Mm.
And there's nothing I could do. The law, he would have killed me if I'd went for my little brother. He was 6 when I left home.
Mm.
Yet I'm at fault for everything that was done to him. Even to this day, I'm blamed. And they blame me for my oldest brother. He finally got nerve enough to leave and married that girl. But he finally came back and was he lived there when they died. And they abused the kids. And that's been revealed to me.
Wow.
And it's just heartbreaking. But as one person, I can only take mentally and fight so hard for such a little. I didn't fail, but I sure couldn't accomplish what the law should have. The law knew what was happening and did nothing about it. And you'll see that in the movie.
Okay.
On Redbird Phoenix.
Yes, I definitely want to get to that. I got a few more questions about your dad and about
That's
the time.
fine. You go ahead.
So, I mean, it seems like the neighborhood or the community, everybody knew that something was going on, even if they didn't know the specifics of what he was doing, with the sexual abuse and physical abuse and mental abuse. But everybody knew that something was going on. Did he ever get convicted or
No.
even arrested,
No.
or nobody ever raised any flags?
They wouldn't let him come around. I had a neighbor later tell me she was up on the bluff. Her and her husband lived up on the mountain. I called it a bluff above our farm, right above our house. And she said they would take binoculars and watch him beat us.
Wow.
And the law would do nothing. From 53 to 65, there was no laws on the
That's
books
insane. So you said
in Arkansas to help. You didn't get help. The only help I got is a DHS worker happened to see me having to be led. I had crossed eye and having to be led down the street. If I was let go, I'd just fall off the sidewalk, couldn't see, and would stagger. My body was bent this way trying to see. And I found out later I'm blind in this eye. I have motion sight only, 5 blind spots in this eye. Dr. Andrew Lawton told me he was a specialist in Arkansas. He said, I don't know how you ever even saw. He said, how did you ever learn to read, have worked in all these offices, done all this writing? He said, your mind some way forced your optic brain to work. I said, well, I guess guts and determination, gumption.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'd have to accede to that.
Wow.
But everybody was afraid of him. He was 6'2", weighed 280 pounds. And he'd slip up on you and knock you out with a 2x4. And I know he murdered several people buried on that farm.
He murdered people.
Yes. There was a man was sitting on the end of the rock wall, dressed in blue jeans and a chambray shirt and a cap. He watched us for weeks on end. And I was so afraid, he finally hollered at me, come here. And I had my little baby sister. It's in the book. I walked over close. He said, I'm not going to harm you girls. I'm here. I'm watching your dad. And I want you to tell him, I know what he did. I'm here watching him. And finally, when I told my dad, he went berserk. He'd take his 33rd and run out the door hollering, I know you're out there, you sorry bastard. I'm going to kill you. You're dead. And he'd just take that gun and start shooting everywhere. And so one night, it was about April, dark, rainy night, he comes in bloody from head to toe. But he had started telling us it was a red and white dog. Our cans of milk started getting empty. 10 gallons of milk back then was valuable. Mm-hmm. It was being poured out where he had put it in a spring for the milk hauler to pick up every night, emptied. And it hit me later. Wow. No dog could drive off a milk can lid that had been pounded on with a rock. But that's when the man disappeared. And my dad come in bloody and made my mother get up and help strip his clothes and burn them. These were brand new clothes. And he said he fought harder than we thought, and he weighed 185 pounds. It took my dad and my brother to help me kill him. I found the grave. I know where it is. I've tried to show it.
And that was the same man that stopped you?
Yeah.
That said he was watching?
Yeah, and he brought us pawpaws to eat.
Oh, wow.
So he was either a private detective or someone from law enforcement, state of Washington, Maryland, Delaware, Kansas, Oklahoma, someone that was owned to him. And I figure at that point was trying to find those 2 girls that he was suspected of kidnapping on our property. And at when the tornado hit, my grandfather, when I was in the 4th grade, when my grandfather, my dad beat him really bad and made us kids watch. And my grandpa told him, he said, I'm going to kill you. But he said, I either kill you or you buy me out. I give you 3 months to get a loan and buy me out, and your brother to buy me out of this big property. They owned almost probably 2,000 or 3,000 acres there together. My grandpa had 1,000 and something, and my dad had 430 something, and my uncle, I think, had 700 or 800. And so it was all, gelled together that they had owned. And my dad had to go and get an FHA loan and buy my grandpa out. And he moved. Wow. He left. He told me, he said, "Kitten, I got to go." My grandpa and grandma was the only people I ever knew that loved me. They were good people. Now, my grandpa, when he was young, was a bounder. He ran around on my grandma. But he said he told me he never touched his kids.
Yeah.
But his dad did. And my grandma and grandpa, I got to live with them one summer. And what a blessed summer that was. I got to know my grandparents. And because of them, I'd hear them praying across the field, calling my name in prayer. And telling me that Jesus loved me, that my dad was wrong, and trying to stand between me and him when he was beating me. They told me, "We love you. This is not God. Aaron's not of God. He's wrong in what he's doing." And they confronted him, and they told him, they said, "We know what you're doing, you and Betty, and we're leaving. We can't be a part of it. The sheriff won't do anything, so we're getting out." Could you blame them? I mean, Grandpa, died at 86. Grandma almost, she was 96. They at least had a few years of peace because it was a constant thing, watching, fighting every day. And I'm at peace. I can understand how I developed agoraphobia. I just wanted a place to hide.
Right. I'm done with people. Yeah.
Done with the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. For those 2 girls that came up missing, that he was suspected of, kidnapping or whatever happened, has anything ever come out of that developed?
No.
Nobody's ever found the bodies, no discoveries?
Nobody's tried.
Really?
No one has tried. And I've asked and asked. And I'll go to my grave asking.
Have they ever excavated that land that they were living on?
No.
Okay. So for all we know,
no,
there are still human bones.
Yes. I've been told that there's
on that land.
That my 2 brothers told me that they saw at 2 different times. There was several years between the 2. The older brother told me that he saw them carrying a body on the horse up and dumping it in a cave. My baby brother told me the same thing.
Jeez.
And I know where the cave is. And after I got married, because I took my husband up there, he went and got a half stick of dynamite. How he obtained it, I don't know. And blew the big old rock off down into the cave cavern, but you could still get in. The cave, it was explored in the 30s, and it went back. They got scared at 1.5 miles in and came back out. And he just threw those bodies evidently off of that rock down into the cave where a creek was running through it and out. And nobody's ever went in there and looked.
Wow.
I'd figure by now the bodies were down 6 to 8 foot if they were just thrown in. But all that's there. And it bothers me. Where did he get those 2 girls from? What did their parents? It was not in Arkansas because there was no missing girls. But he would disappear, Ty, from my earliest memories of the 1st grade. He would disappear months on end. Just gone. Get up one morning, he'd be gone, claiming to be in California, Washington, working. Months later, I'd get up and there he'd be in Betty's bed, my mother's bed. Never, and have money. No explanation where he'd been and what he'd been doing.
What was he doing for a living that he could make that excuse?
I don't know.
You don't know how he made his money?
There he cut timber off the property.
Yeah.
But early 60s, he quit leaving. After my baby brother was born, he and my mother finally got a job at different chicken or turkey plants and worked.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I don't know what he was doing. He would skid logs out. I started skidding logs at a young age with 2 horses. He made stave boats off the property for beer barrels, and he'd sell oak for lumber, hickory for lumber. We had gigantic walnut trees. He'd sell those. What he was doing, I have no idea.
Wow.
And he'd always try to run for office in the county. He'd always somehow come up with $500 to pay a filing fee. And he tried to run for governor. He imagined he was
really that high of an office.
Well, he was going to be president.
Oh, really?
He would get in front of a mirror and practice to make us kids listen to his political speeches.
What?
Oh, yeah. I sat for hours on my butt tired and listened to him pontify his political speeches. Then we'd have to clap. It was totally bizarre.
So, I mean, safe to say he was a full-on narcissist then.
Oh, full-blown narcissist, yes. And manipulative. He was into power, control, and manipulation, which I dealt with in the counseling book. Mm-hmm. He had the whole spectrum of narcissism, schizophrenia, sociopath down. And I've been told that the reason I can't get his FBI records is that one of his handlers is still alive. And that's why it would be a breach of national security if I were to get his records. It's been an interesting journey. I fought
one of his handlers. What do you mean by that?
Okay, if you're an FBI informant and do dirty stuff for them, you have handlers, agents that you work under.
Okay, right.
And as my understanding is, that is what is wrong. Why that his records can't be procured.
Even though he's passed away.
Yes, he died in 2014, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I would assume that his handler would be in their late 80s, 90s, that if they're still alive.
Probably not still in service.
No, totally retired. But I can't blame them for protecting who if he was associated. I have no animosity at all.
So what would he be informing on while he's committing these heinous crimes?
I have no idea. I've been told a lot of speculation.
Wow. Okay.
But I have no proof of anything. And he'd claim, I work for the FBI. He said, he'd tell me, I know to make you disappear. I can take you to that cave and nobody ever look for you or find you. That's what he used on every one of us to keep us there. It was fear.
So he threatened that very same cave that you think that he probably threw the bodies down in.
And during the Korean conflict, a lot of planes were passing over. He would make us run and fall to the ground, kick our feet out from under, slap us, shove us down, saying that plane was spying on him. And they would come through flying just as low as they could above the T-tops, year after year, month after month. And he just knew they was watching him. And he said, they've got equipment. They can be filming me, taking pictures of us. It was bizarre. When I first started trying to write my story, I thought, this is just too hard to believe for people. And my sister, she tweeted me and said, twixed me, and she says, you didn't tell but 10% of the truth. And I said, honey, if I told it all, it's too bizarre. Mm-hmm. How can you? But look at the cults that are out there.
Right.
And he'd go to all these different churches. He had the Bible totally memorized. He had the Communist Manifesto memorized.
By heart.
By heart. And I'm suspecting that was part of his use he had a photographic memory. Mm-hmm. I used to have the same. And when we go through my husband thing, because of PTSD, I lost a lot of that.
Wow. I'm
getting it back through a lot of therapy and work. But I can remember pages and pages of numbers, faces I could remember, how to describe them, how tall, what, down to the article of socks they had on. But he had this stuff memorized, and it has been suggested that he was used in California during the 50s in looking at the people belonging to the communist parties. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, he could spout any page in the Communist Manifesto there was. Quote it. Sit and argue it.
Wow.
And he tried to convince me I needed to become a communist. Never did convince me. Hasn't today. I'm still unconvinced.
So he was pro-communism.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
I'd say he's card-carrying communist.
Really?
Yes. Oh, the government was bad. We needed communism. Everybody'd have things in common. He was going to be president. He was going to bring this about. And then I hear
And he was going to be president of a communist government.
For the United States.
For the United States.
Yes.
Wow. That's a lot to take in.
It is bizarre. I look at this and I think, oh my word. There was no way to put it all in a script or all in a book. There's no way at all. And this is, I've tossed the suggestion out if do a trilogy movie and then a TV series going back and based on all of this.
Yeah.
And do it kind of on the, like Little House on the Prairie series.
Right.
Bring up from childhood through, and all I do now is through my counseling work. And the movie is written from my counselor perspective.
Okay.
The script is.
Got you.
We look at it through my eyes doing group therapy.
Yeah.
And we intertwine the story that way I do.
So how did you get out of that house? I know you eventually moved out off the farm.
I graduated fourth in my class. No, I was fourth in the class. And I won a scholarship to Drawings Business School in Little Rock. And I spent the summer walking 7 miles one way to Kingston on a government little school. They got the funding. So they hired me. I mowed yards, that Kingston schoolyard, the whole big area all summer long.
Wow.
And I'd walk home at night, 14 miles a day, plus probably walk 20 at mowing. And I buffed the floors. I cleaned windows. And from the 8th grade on, I worked in the lunchroom and earned my lunch and my books because he wouldn't let me go to school. Digressing a moment, he sold me at age 12 to somebody in the community to marry who was 36.
Sold you?
Yes, for a farm, $500 and for the use of a farm. And was going to force me to marry him. Told the guy I was 18. And he come to take me to Missouri to going to get married. And he said, your dad said you agreed to marry me. And I said, nope, I ain't going.
Yeah.
Hung my head down, stubbed my toe, and I said, I ain't going. My dad grabbed me and whooped me, said, you're going. I said, no. And I refused to go, and the guy demanded, how old is she? And I said, 12. Dad said 18. I said, I'm 12 years old. I ain't going.
Old. Oh, my God.
We make a little bit kinder in the script.
Yeah.
But the guy was a good man. He never married. He was a godly man, just ignorant, but he walked away. And I made my dad give his $500 back to him.
A godly man, but he didn't see any problems at all
I was 18.
in buying
he thought I was
somebody
18.
to marry him?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was my dad's property. He always told me he owned me.
Right.
He had a check he'd paid my mother sometime when I was a little for school at first grade. He had paid her $350 when she left him, and it said purchase of children. He had that check and kept it stored in a lard can so that he could pull it out every once in a while. And he'd say, see, I own you. There's not a thing you can do.
So he bought you from your mother?
Yeah, $350, me and my oldest brother. Had for 2 kids on the check.
Wow.
And it had been cashed. And she come back. She left him different times, always came back.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. And it was a learned behavior. And, it's like her dad, I didn't find this out, as I was telling you earlier. I didn't find out that her mother didn't die in 27 like she claimed. She didn't die until 1941 and is buried in New Jersey. My daughter found her. So, I mean, all those years, she got married in 41 to my dad. All those years, she and her sister were allowed to believe her mother was dead. I mean, what a tragedy.
Right.
And was abused by her uncle. And her grandmother hated her because she was brought back, and here was these 2 girls thrust on her.
Right.
And to raise. And she was very violent toward them. And being sexually abused by an uncle, her and her sister both grew up to be sex offenders. And I feel bad for my cousins. And I feel horrible for the situation we grew up in.
Of course.
But I made up my mind. I knew by age 12, education was the only escape I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I was determined to go to school. And I had a dear, precious aunt, my dad's sister Daisy, would buy me clothes, and a cousin, and they'd leave them in trash sacks or wrapped up in a sheet up beside the road where I'd get off the bus. And I'd see them and pick them up. They'd get shoes. And my aunt, when I told her, I said, I'm going to finish school. She'd buy shoes. You know what? Back then they had just set up markets. They didn't call them garage sales, but that's what they were. And they'd set up there at Huntsville at the livestock auction, and you could buy clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And my aunt would buy just a whole box of shoes, or she'd go to auctions. Honey, half of them wouldn't even come near fit me. I'd bend my toes and wear those shoes to school, or I went barefooted.
Yeah.
And I finished high school because her helping me. And I had that cousin that her name was Goucher, and she would go and buy clothes, and I would wear them whatever they were and give my sister
Mm-hmm.
what would fit her, and my mother took what would fit her, and I made do. And I went to school, and I started washing dishes in the 8th grade for my lunch and books. And I worked clear through high school, and the cooks fed me when they found out I was in 9th grade, and Dad wouldn't pay for my lunch. He said, you wouldn't marry that guy? I eat off the floor in the corner. I cooked. So I learned to eat hot food out of the skillet. I thought I had to cook for them, so I learned to eat before they come to the table.
Wow.
And he'd throw stuff in the corner, and I'd eat it because I was starving. But the cooks, God love them, they would feed me at school, have something for me to eat in the morning, set it in the back in where they stored their big cans of food for the school. And I'd find a bowl there with something in it to eat. And at lunch, I got to eat because with the other students. And before I went home, there was another bowl set on a can, and I had something before I left on the bus. I grew 9 inches that year. They fed me. And I credit Willie Austin, Alma Ware for keeping me alive. They were a godsend and good to me.
It sounds like it.
Oh, they were wonderful women.
Yeah.
They knew. Willie she had seen my mother beaten, seen what my dad was. They wouldn't even, got to where they wouldn't even let him come to their house. Mm-hmm. No neighbors would visit with us. There was one guy. He would come. He told me later, he said, the only thing I knew was just to appear now and then, hopefully to keep him from going to the extreme with you children. He'd ride his horse up and stop and visit.
Wow.
He was a old bachelor, but a good man.
Yeah.
Wonderful neighbor. Yeah.
And so your aunt was sort of taking care of you as well with the clothes and all that stuff. Did I hear earlier that your uncle was also one of your abusers?
Yes. That was
so
one
was
of
it
my
her
dad's
husband?
No, it was her brother.
Okay, her brother.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was a kleptomaniac, yet she would claim to be a preacher, and she'd preach everywhere. But bless her heart, my dad had raped her.
Yeah.
And they had a love-hate relationship. That's the dynamics of abuse in a family. You'll blame each other, you'll hurt each other, or it's other person's fault. My brother, when I confronted my dad about him, my oldest brother, you know what he told my dad? He said, yeah, I raped her. She provoked me.
Wow.
Never would admit that our mother, forced him into the abuse as a partner. And so, we don't know what was the products of all that.
Right.
At 16, I was pregnant by him or my dad, and they beat the baby out of me.
Oh my gosh.
And I bled for 90 days, went to the doctor. And what stuck with me all those years, I was so horrified that doctor did an exam in front of them. Mortifying. You know what my dad asked him? He said, will she still be able to have other children? That has stuck in my mind like a burr all those years.
Yeah.
And the doctor later told me it was a miracle I ever had kids. Abuse stops the ovaries of little girls from growing. Mm-hmm. And so much of the abuse. Mm-hmm. If it's long term, it affects reproductive organs.
Wow.
And I'm blessed. I had 3 beautiful children.
That's yeah. Cae, you have an interesting story. This is more than any fictional movie I've watched any recent term. Yeah. Thank you for being willing to share all this, by the way. So you finally graduated high school and you moved out. And then what was life like once you were able to escape that part?
I moved to Little Rock, found a wonderful job with a couple, Harold and Hazel Goodfellow. They had a daycare center across from Capitol High School. Unfortunately, I went to a local Assembly of God church down the street. And during that year, the pastor tried to rape me. And if I said his name, everybody in the state would know who it was.
Wow.
And he told me that...
Is that because he's a prominent preacher now still? Or
he's dead now, but he was a
Okay.
prominent business owner.
Oh,
He is named in the book.
nice. Okay.
But, and then I really decided it was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was strong. I fought him off, quit the church. And the Assemblies of God told me they'd took his license, come to find out in 2006 when I come back, he was still on TV advertising his wares. And they had not removed his credentials. They lied.
Mm.
And they had the audacity to tell me I lusted after the man, or I wouldn't have said he tried to rape me.
Mm. Yeah.
I have
It's your fault.
It's my
yeah.
victim blaming
Uh-huh.
is the key component in too many Assembly of God churches and the Pentecost Church of God.
Mhm.
I learned that to my sorrow.
Right.
I preached for them unlicensed for several years. When I went to Tech, they sent me, I had a wonderful church at Russellville. At that time, First Assembly of God was one of the best churches ever. Had wonderful deacons, and they took us college students. We started Chi Alpha
Mhm.
at Tech, and we went to Bible school at the church for the next 4 years. I was taught the Bible. Had wonderful men, there was no kind of problems there at that church. I can say that church loved and grew me and the rest of the students involved. They were a blessing. And basically, besides my grandparents, I am who I am today because of that congregation and how that they trained and taught me
Mm.
and the rest of us.
Right.
They purchased a Chi Alpha Center there on campus before it was done. And it was a wonderful opportunity not only to go to Tech. It was hard to study because I didn't know how, but I managed. And because of my education, after going to Drawn's Business School, I was able to get a job every summer in an office somewhere.
Mm.
And I was able to learn and because of the training I got. And I had such a thirst to be different and to learn. And I was a wonderful youth minister, and I helped build Christ Ambassador groups in so many churches while I was at Tech. I'd go and preach revivals and help them get started. And it was a great experience
Mhm.
seeing all these young people change their lives. And at the end of my years at Tech, we had a campus-wide revival on campus, and they couldn't even have classes. People were kneeling and praying.
Mm.
And becoming spirit-filled, talking in tongues, such as the Assembly of God teaches. And it was all because of that church,
Mhm.
believing in us students and giving us the opportunity. Anna Laura Jaggers was an agnostic. She taught humanities. Loved the lady, but at that time she was like to be sarcastic. She'd say, "Now, call me by name. What is your opinion as a preacher on this subject?" And after I come back in 2006, I ran into her at Tech. Bless her heart, she still remembered me.
Wow.
She said, "I was mean to you." And she said, "I need to tell you, because of you, I've become a Christian.
Hmm.
I've accepted Jesus, and I'm ready to die." She's in her 90s.
Yeah.
And I had another teacher there that was Henri. He was in science. And Dr. Hudson, bless his heart, he was an atheist.
Mhm.
And he said, if you don't write at the end of this term that you believe you evolved from monkeys, I'll give you an F. Of course, dumb me, I raised my hand and I said, "Sir, you might have come from a monkey. I know I didn't." And boy, he says, "I'm going to give you an F." I said, "You can if you will." I got out of that class with a D-. I walk in to see a D drugstore during this last several years, and I hear my name called, the name I used to be, and he hollers, "Hey!" And I turn around, there's this old man sitting there, and I turn around, I go, "Yes?" He said, "I'm Dr. Hudson." I go, oh God, what's he going to say to me now? And he says, come here. And he said, you haunted me. He said, I gave you a bad grade and you didn't earn it. But he said, you never went after me. I said, I knew God would take care of it. He said, well, he did. I never had a restful night since.
Yeah.
But he said, I've turned my heart over to Jesus. And he said, I had people trying to find you. And I couldn't find you because I wanted to apologize. The C&D drugstore owner was standing there. He told me later, Charles Oates, he said, I can't believe that. And Dr. Hudson pulled me into his arms and said, I'm so sorry, but I want to tell you, I'll be waiting on you in heaven.
Wow.
It made my day. We walk through things, Ty, and we don't understand. But one thing I have learned that I want to stress, God trusted me as a little child to survive. He didn't cause this trouble. People chose that path. They chose to abuse. But God trusted me and entrusted inside of me a spark of survival. And he gave me grace to walk and to love him. I have never been mad at God. Not once did I ever think God caused this. So many people who have been abused, they blame God. I'm sorry, God didn't do it. I preached the book of Job. I started looking at the book of Job, and I thought, there's truth to that. Look at all the people during the Holocaust, how many survivors they were that came out. And I heard one of them talking on this here in the past year. She had went to the Congo, was a missionary, and during the Congo rebellion, she was captured and raped. And I can't remember her name, but you could find it. It was, I guess, in the early 70s. And they asked her, said, why don't you hate those men? Why aren't you mad at God? And that's what started me on this journey in the last several months of looking at God's trust. And she said, they had killed, everybody left. I was the only doctor, and I stayed. These had become my people. I'd spent my life there working among they were my brothers and sisters. If they had to die, I was willing to die with them. And she said, when they drugged me, two men one on each side, dragging me, and I knew they were going to rape me, I looked back and at the wall, and a big sign said, trust me. And she said, I saw that, and God spoke to my heart. You can do this because I trust you to be able to survive. And she said, I never had hatred to what the people did to me. They were doing what they had been radicalized to do. And she said, it's not my place to judge, it's God's. She said, my place is to continue to love and forgive myself because I was powerless. And that's something, Ty, that I have come to the conclusion I'm not at fault. And the hardest thing for a victim to do is to forgive themselves. And that's the only thing that is required of a victim. We're not required to forgive those who raped us. That's God's business. But we do have to turn it over and say, Lord, I'm giving this to you. I release it. I'm not going to give any more real estate in my mind to who raped me. I'm giving that man over to you for your revenge and your justification in what you have to do. I'm yours. And that's what I've come to.
That's quite the conclusion. You must have been very convincing in your arguments with your teachers.
I've tried.
Whenever they try to challenge you.
I knew the scripture.
Okay.
And I never got angry about anything that was said. It was not my place to be angry. Doesn't mean I can't be militant. I've been accused of being a feminist Nazi or Nazi feminist through college years. I learned that term going back to Boise State University, and I thought, I can live with that. Nazi doesn't just mean a Nazi Germany. It's a term that can apply because we fight back.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yes. And so I'm very much a feminist as far as women's rights, but we've pushed it overboard and alienated instead of taking a balance and saying, what can we do as a victim to explain to you the trauma?
Right.
And that's what I'm hope to get to do here in Arkansas and work with the state legislature, say, hey, have you ever sit down and us sit as a group and understand what a victim goes through. And I was blessed to serve on the Domestic Violence Council in Idaho for 14 years for the Alliance for the Rights of Children, and worked. Governor Andrus had a domestic violence council. He directly under him. Yeah. We need that in Arkansas badly. We need the governor to have a domestic violence council with a director that pulls all these groups now in Arkansas together. Let us teach the victims it's okay to be angry. Yeah. And all these groups, let us pull together and get funding that we can get a state constitution amendment, that we can get the laws where prosecutors can go back and force the courts to do due diligence and keep these men in prison and send them. And I think the governor recently signed into law, if you rape a kid under 13 and under, it's a death penalty.
Right.
But there needs to be a cohesive constitutional amendment that covers all these few outlying little amendments they've passed. They need to be brought together under the governor's auspices. And as a domestic violence council and with a constitutional amendment that pulls all this together, that every state legislature can say, I am so proud of what we've done. We've protecting the children of Arkansas.
Right. But it kind of has to go, same thing with substance abuse, recovery, where it's like you can make laws, people from the outside that have never been through that situation can sort of, posture and make laws and
it's
sort of present bills.
Exactly.
Or say, oh, I see what you guys' problem is. This is what would fix it. Let me propose this and pass this bill, when they're not talking to the people who have been through those situations and actually learning, oh, actually we were on the wrong track. This is what we need. But they need advice from people that have been through those situations and saying, this is what it's like to actually go through that situation. This is probably what I needed at the time. This is what I found that has helped me since then recover. And so your insight is invaluable. Like, you can't pay for it. You can't buy it.
Well, it's there and it can be done.
Yeah.
That's one thing I appreciate about the former, Governor Cecil Andrus. He helped me privately and my attorney privately. And he appointed my attorney because of what he'd done for my family. My attorney, at the time that I got away from my husband, he took my case for 87 cents. Took me on as a client. It's all the money I had. He was a Hispanic. Because of his helping me, he became the circuit judge. And then Governor Andrus appointed him as the first Idaho Appeals Court Hispanic judge over the state of Idaho. And he served till his term, he aged out or his term has been out.
That's great.
Wonderful man. And he kept my daughter's picture in the front of his big black notebook that he carried. I only went to one court case and that he was head of. He told me, he said, don't come to court. I don't want to excuse myself. But he attended my kids' graduations. He was there for me. And he helped me. He gave me advice. And he fought the prosecutor. And the governor told me, he said, the prosecutor and the sheriff has been bought off. He said, we can't find the paper trail. If they'd had the computer system when they do today, they'd have found the money. And the lawyer he lost the prosecutor's office by one vote, called me up midnight, threatened to kill me. And the governor appointed Evelyn Bowe, a legislature who was, she went and lobbied. She was a lobbyist, paid for her own lobbying for domestic violence. And he sent her to go with me everywhere. I never visited the sheriff's office or the prosecutor again without her there as a witness.
Wow.
And I can say this, Governor Andrus was a godsend to the state of Idaho. He had guts. And he allowed every legislation session that came up, he'd have somebody call me or he'd see me at Boise State University and say, hey, we're going to be so-and-so. I need you to show up and let me testify. Right. And I told my story simply as I have here.
Right.
And I got the first conviction in Idaho by a wife. I didn't file for divorce. I went after him legally. And it was the first conviction got by a wife in Idaho. And then, because of the federal VA covering it up, I sued them. And as far as I understand, we were the first case in the U.S. that got a settlement from the federal VA because the doctors had covered up rape and abuse. And they thought they'd wiped the records clean. But I remember the day I told them, and I signed for Richard Stallings, a congressman, to get in to his VA records. And he called my attorney. He said, get his records. It's there on the day she said it was. And they cleansed the record of all when we got it. Every letter I'd written begging for help, every phone call had been eradicated out of the file. But he was convicted.
Wow.
And it's in the back of the hat, man. The paper where the court doc that the prosecuting attorney says, your husband has pled guilty. His sentence was a farce, but he was convicted and was on parole for 7.5 years. Came back to Arkansas. And I've been told by family of the woman he married that he raped 2 of her grandchildren. And there is a disease among pedophiles. They crave children. There is no killing that craving. After I'd taught at the prison and did the counseling, the government quit funding any more counseling for sex offenders. I found in all my studies only 2% ever stop. It's a continual thing.
2% of all
sex offenders quit.
Okay, not just the pedophiles, just
I'm talking about
sex offenders.
all of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Porn is part of it. Porn addiction. Child. Now we have child pictures being trafficked out. It's not child porn because that says the victim agreed to it. This is child trafficking of sexual explicit pictures that are being out there on the internet, and it's a huge business. Sex trafficking. My dad was trying to sex traffic me. Is what he was doing. Now we have a term for it. And, you know, The Sound of Freedom was one of the biggest money makers and out there. But it's true.
Yeah.
We have children disappearing constantly. We had 8 kids disappear in Idaho. And the sheriff, I worked with him. I debriefed sheriff department on trauma. I'm really well trained in that. And he said they knew those 8 children had been flown by helicopter out of Idaho, probably to a ship somewhere on the east or west coast, and sold on the black market. That was back in the 90s. And it's the highest business, paying business now in the United States is sex trafficking. That's the number 1 biggest profit-making business in America. And I'm out to try to help stop it. I will donate my counseling book to any law firm that requests it. I send it to them free to use in court. I donate it to any prosecutor that wants it. I will help train victims that are over 18 to go to court. I do that free.
Wow.
Prep them for court.
Wow. That's amazing.
I worked on a case in Idaho. A lady, her husband had raped her little girl. Her best friend came up from San Diego and shot him dead on the sidewalk. They charged her with capital murder. And I worked with the law firm. I worked with her, taught her how to dress, walk, and act. Jury let her off 100%.
Wow.
It was justified. He got 13 years, but he never ratted her out. He was a friend.
Yeah. And
she's been able to go on with her career. And lawyers were wonderful. Good law firm.
All your time that you spent with especially the pedophiles, right? Where you said that they have a hunger for children.
It's a compulsion.
Okay. Yeah. So
they can't. A lot of them have part of a conscience. I've seen lobotomies. I've seen chemical castration.
Okay.
Some have went as far as for castration, but it's something in the brain that is broken.
Right.
I don't care if they cut their hands off. They're going to use their toes. They're going to use their mouth. It's a compulsion in all my studies that I have never found a cure for. They can't stop.
Have you ever found any sort of cause, like a common cause between all of them?
I'd say a big percentage were abused as children.
Okay.
Or witnessed abuse. That's that learned behavior, again, that's passed on down generationally.
Right.
But what I learned in doing the counseling with them and talking with is the ownership thing. And I did examine that in the counseling book. And now there's been some studies done on the ownership idea by other people. And I put my counseling book out there as like at Boise State University. My thesis was in hopes, like my professor and I talked, Dr. Ben Parker, we talked about the fact who can come along behind me and expand or counteract and say your thesis is not true and prove it untrue Or how can they take it further and prove it to be even more so?
Right.
And that's why these studies are done and put out there, is for other people to take it forward and try to even get a different perspective. Like you were talking about, if legislatures could understand the perspective of, say, 1,000 victims of drug addiction, of pedophilia, of incest, rape, and sexual abuse, domestic violence, if they could listen to that many people, I interviewed that many, and if they could listen, they're going to get a whole new enlightenment. They'll have an epiphany that this could be in their family. When it happens in their family, they become a strong advocate. But I don't want it to happen to other people.
Right.
I want it to stop, educate, open eyes, and pass laws that has some teeth. And again, I'll go back. This should be under the governor's direction. I've seen it work in my state in Idaho for the 20 years I was there, and I hope it will work here. I believe that we've got a governor that's open-minded enough to want to look and see. And I pray, I believe she's willing to take a stand.
Yeah, going back to the law that was just passed, like you were talking about, the death penalty, threat to anybody that sexually abuses anybody, a minor. Well, I was looking at comments because I saw that come through. I think KRK or somebody posted it, and a lot of the comments were, that people were like, well, this is a good step in the right direction, but why is it limited to? I believe it was 12 years old and
13 and under.
13 and under.
Yes.
Thank you. So why not 14, 15?
I agree. It should be at any age. And they have a scope. I don't know where we got one in Idaho. We fought in the CARES unit, got the scope. It's got a name, and I'm old. I forgot. I could have to look it up. But it actually can take pictures of a little boy's bottom and a little girl's and actually prove and show the scarring that's done by rape. But also, a lot of girls that are raped don't scar. They don't tear. And here in Arkansas, they want a scar or a shown tear to get a conviction. That's putting the burden on the little child,
right? And
when it shouldn't be. And we need that. It's expensive to own, but we need a unit specifically specified for every victim in Arkansas, such as the CARES unit in Idaho. We need that here under the governor's direction, that every child, Arkansas is not that far to drive across.
Right.
And bring to that center and have a scope done, and that be admissible to court.
Yeah.
And that determine, and then believe the child. Believe every little victim that says. This prosecutor that was in Idaho that I believe was bought off, he went on then and started defending perpetrators, pedophiles. And he'd tell the little victims on the stand, you wanted it. You asked for it.
He would tell that to the victims?
To the little victims, yes, until he was stopped and forbidden to go into court anymore.
Wow. And
that's what is said by a lot of police. They believe how if a girl dresses, provocative, we ask for it.
Yeah.
A man should have brains enough. I don't care how provocative the girl is dressing. That's part of being a teenager. So many girls are not taught modesty. So they get good comments from their peers. The boys whistle.
Right.
They take them out on a date.
Yeah.
Now, I saw little 8, 9-year-old girls pregnant in Idaho in the school district where I taught.
Wow.
They were sent away, come back months later, baby given away, and expected to finish school.
Yeah, I've never bought that argument of like, you provoked him into and like it doesn't matter if there's the naked, most attractive woman in the world standing in front of you, by putting on her, you're insinuating that guy had no self-control, no will whatsoever.
The lack of self-control, and I'm saying how unmanly can a man be?
Right.
To rape a child. There's no manhood in that. The public doesn't understand. Pedophiles, rapists don't get sexually off on raping women and children or men. It is for power, control, and manipulation. That's where they get their erection from, is the thought, I'm in control. I can do what I want to this victim. That's the high. And they seek more and more and more. It's just like into porn. It takes more and more porn to turn a guy on. And it marginalizes his partner or his wife, or for the woman, it marginalizes the man. It makes them become nasty to the guy that's into porn. They can't even get an erection without more and more porn. It's a fantasy. They can look at all these naked pictures. It's a fantasy. And the wife who's loved them dearly, had children by them, who stood by them, how can they keep in a marriage when they're not touched, when they're marginalized, pushed out and said, oh, you don't look like this woman. You won't do what she's doing in that picture. That's how sick it is.
Yeah.
And we've got too many men into that, especially in the church. I mean, we've got a lot of people, ministers, deacons, church members who are into porn secretly. It's not, I mean, now it's readily on your phone or your computer.
Sure.
You just pay a fee and it comes. And the FBI, there's not enough watchers, computer people enough they're trying. They're doing their best to try to catch these people. And they're catching them every once in a while. And it is bad stuff.
Yeah.
Here in Arkansas, just recently, how many preachers have been caught and charged?
And I was making a comment about this the other day, but like I was just, scrolling through Facebook. About once a day I go through Facebook and that's it.
Me too.
You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, I've had enough of that. But there was 3 or 4 stories from the same day. One was a doctor, I believe, that was in Fort Smith, that had been doing it for years and set up cameras and even in people's homes, but a lot of child abuse. And then there was, I can't remember where it was, maybe Benton, I think it was. I don't want to put that on him. But anyways, this guy that was convicted of sex crimes with a minor, and he had done it before the first time whenever he was a school teacher.
Yes. And
then went to prison, got out, but now he's reoffended and done it all over again.
And then preacher down here somewhere in southern Arkansas from Little Rock on years of abuse. And that's with the guy, the preacher that tried to rape me. Yeah. 6 other women came forward in church and said he had approached them. None of us were believed.
Right.
And that's the sad thing.
That's yeah, for sure. And when you're walking down the street, when you're walking through a store, you don't realize how many people, just like we were talking about with your teacher, you don't know what they're going through. Like, you don't know how many people you just walk past that haven't been busted yet for the abuse that they're causing other people. Or you also don't know how many people you're walking past that is a victim that is afraid to say anything because they think it would make their life worse if they even drew attention to what was going on in their lives, or that nobody believed them. Or like with you in your situation where everybody knew what your dad was doing, not specifics, but they knew something was going on. Your neighbor was watching with binoculars. They're watching it physically.
They knew that he and my mother both were bad people.
Right.
And they tried to make excuses. Oh, Betty's been, she's being abused, but that was no excuse. She was part of it. She was they become intertwined, just like a vine wrapping around a tree. They become trauma bonded. He would beat her. She'd throw dishes at him, and back and forth every day. Something traumatic was happening in our house. Yeah. And it just becomes the norm.
Did that carry over into your relationships after you left the house?
I married a man that was both my mother and father. And he saw me coming. I was dumb, hungry for somebody to love me. I dated him 3 days and married him. What an idiot.
You were married after 3 days?
What an idiot. But I knew his daughter, went through college with her. And I thought, well, he goes to church.
Now, hold on. You went through college with his daughter? Mm-hmm. So he was an older man.
23 years older than me.
Okay.
I just looking for somebody to love me, Ty, to tell me I was important, to tell me I was beautiful. And he filled all of that. Married 6 weeks, woke up and him raping me in my sleep.
Wow.
Told me to go back to sleep. I put up with that for 20 years until I found out he had violated all my children. And at 44 years old, I grew up. As I tell a lot of my clients, I got my cojones.
Yeah.
I said no. And he would have killed us. I spent one night digging my grave, covered it back up. And he told me, he said, when I decide I'm done, I'm going to kill you. This grave will be easy for me to evacuate, dig back out real fast. I'm going to bury you. And I'm going to tell the kids you've run away, and I will tell the neighbors you've left us. and I will do what I want to the kids from now on. And the day I got away, he said tonight, he admitted while he raped me 3 or 4 times, tore me all to pieces inside, and I've had to have surgery still having to deal with it today. And he said, tonight, I will have both girls in the bed with you. And from now on, I will do what I want to anytime I want to the 3 of you and to your son. None of the kids were his.
Yeah.
He told the investigating officer, I wouldn't rape my own kids.
But they weren't his kids.
They weren't his kids, according to him. And that officer tried, bless his heart, Bob Miles was the investigating officer. He tried to testify in court, and the prosecutor wouldn't let him.
Really?
My pastor wanted to testify. He had interviewed the kids, and they had all told him. He refused to let him testify. Assemblies of God told him to abandon me. I was his associate helping him preach and teach. And they told him to kick me out of the church and to support my husband. Dan St. Clair did not abandon me and the children. He went to court with us, and the day I left the church, he left. And he was a wonderful man. He had manhood about him.
Yeah.
And anyone out there that is allowing abuse, and you know it, you should go to prison. But I'd say 99% of mothers do not know the abuse is happening by the ex-husband, boyfriend, or a live-in, or a stepfather. You got to open your eyes. I started noticing symptoms, and it took me 6 months to get my little girl to trust me. And I tried to catch him. I was going to kill him, Ty. I was going to shoot him dead. And it took me 6 months. And when she told me, I knew she was telling me the truth. And I got away. It took me 8 days to get away alive. But I ran. And my pastor was waiting on me and hid me. And I got, how I got him arrested? I had to get on news. They hid my face in my little girl's face. We got on the news and told what he'd done and got public opinion. My attorney helped me after I hired him, and he helped me get these interviews with us blanked out. I've still got the interview on the big 8-track tape. He said, you have to get public opinion on your side to get him arrested. And that's how I got him arrested.
Wow.
Was I embarrassed? I was mortified. I was teaching school. I had to go to school, and all my students know that I'd been raped and my kids had.
Wow.
And my school principal that hired me, he told me, he said, I know what's happened. He said, you get yourself up here. I'm going to hire you as I did teaching, would have been a paraprofessional today, but I filled in every teacher that was absent. So 4 school districts hired me to come in, substitute teaching. That's what I did. I stayed busy every day. And eventually went on there. Hard was an aide. And then I'm articulated from there into college back and got my degrees, all these degrees where I could do this stuff.
Wow.
And was I in the classroom? I had full-blown PTSD teaching. I went home every night, sat by the door, fall inside the door and scream, sometimes for hours, from the pain in my brain. I was suicidal 5 years. I understand. Women, when you find out about your children, that's the most horrifying thing. Yeah. Because you realize the man you'd been having sex with has had sex with your children. The awfulness of it. There's no way I can explain that horrible psychological feeling. I disassociated that day. I went literally, could see myself sitting on the roof watching what he was doing to my body. And it took me 5 years scratching the floor to keep from blowing my brains out. My pastor would tell me, you call me when you're so suicidal. I'd sit in the bathtub with the curtain drawn. I was going to kill myself in the bathtub so it wouldn't be a mess for the kids. And I'd call him and sit and talk to him for hours. And he'd talk me down off the ledge. And he stood by me all those years, even after he'd quit being a pastor for the Assemblies of God. I've got other young women that they're like my daughters, and they're absolutely precious. One reminded me last night that we've known each other for over 10 years. I said, you got to be kidding. I got to marry her and her last husband. She got away. a stepfather raped her daughter. Couldn't even get the guy arrested. God had forgiven the perpetrator, so he couldn't judge him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, yeah. That's another thing I want to address is Romans 1:18 through 32. I'm paraphrasing the scripture. It says that it names a list of sins. Sexual abuse, sexual perversion, murder, all that is part of that scripture. And you read a whole bunch of different versions. Basically, it says if a man knows, has understanding that rape, sexual abuse, domestic violence is a sin, and he does it anyway, to him, it's eternal spiritual death. And that's why I say they don't quit. Their mind is seared over like a hot branding iron to the wrongdoing of what they like it.
Mm.
And I've seen about 2% own their crime.
Yeah.
And if they own it, they overcome it and they stop. There is hope. I don't want to leave, this program without saying there is men and women who actually stop, but they own their sin. They tell the victims it's their fault. It wasn't theirs, that they chose as adults to do this to those children.
Right.
And that is the only little glimmer of hope that's out there. And the laws must be changed based on that. We have to have parameters. We can't tie prosecutors' hands where they can't fight for the law. We make deals all the time just to get all these cases through,
right,
and get the victim out of sight, out of mind. We don't follow up and realize how many of these victims become drug addicts. They go into prostitution, and I worked on RAIN. It's a hotline where it deals with abuse. It's an organization, and it's R.A.I.N. And I served on a hotline in the state of Washington while I was teaching, and those girls cut themselves. I spent 3 or 4 hours a night, and I finally had to quit. I couldn't, it was too much with my own ongoing work and teaching. But I heard the most horrifying stories, and I saw the most horrifying perpetrators in prison justifying what they'd done, and they're still there. Mm. And we've got to have a better system. We need better jail systems here in Arkansas. Pope County right now is in need of a new jail, desperately bad. And the sheriff's hands are tied. The prosecutor's hands are tied. And we need drug programs that actually help drug addicts quit. Mm-hmm. We need domestic violence centers that have real trained counselors in rape that can sit there, not just go along with what the victim is saying, but have you considered that this is what you need to do to recover? Be very firm. Victims can become survivors, and they can live a happy life and talk about the abuse as normal because they are normal. It was the perpetrators who are abnormal.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot. Simple solutions to a really, really complicated problem. But like you said, putting any of those things in place would be a great step forward in supplying, you're disrupting that cycle of abuse.
It is. It's stopping that cycle.
Right.
And so that we give, say, 18 years in between rape happening as a baby until you're grown. You need 18 years of grace to recover and the law in place so that the perpetrator, I don't care what age you are, they are responsible for paying your counseling for so many years.
Right.
And have actually certified counselors in domestic violence and rape who understand, have worked with victims and can look from the victim's standpoint of how can that victim recover instead of us putting a Band-Aid on it and petting them and say, oh, I'm so sorry.
Exactly. Right.
We can't let the victim wallow in pity. Mm-hmm. And too many do.
Yeah.
They like the attention.
You made me think, because I was going back through, some of the things I've been through and realized, okay, where any of the things that you just listed, whether it's, the jails or, the battered women shelters, right? If you had actually had licensed counselors that are there, and I was trying to think of because we went to so many different battered women shelters, right? in and out until I was too old to even stay there. But I was trying to think of at all those times, did anybody ever sit us down, like me and my brother or my mom, and be like, hey, how are you?
No.
This is what you went through. This is how you deal with it. Or let's talk about those things. It was just like, hey, here are the rules. Stay here. You guys are assigned this bed.
Yeah.
You can come out to this room and you can play for a while, but then you have to go back and you can't go out and buy this. It's like just putting structure and rules in place, but there's no counseling. Yeah. There's no talking through your, what you went through.
I fought so hard in Idaho, just not me, but there were other, organizations. Cecilia Hetty was the domestic violence director at that time, and her husband was a detective in the sheriff's department, and he got involved. He'd go to counseling with my little girl, and he'd play the perpetrator and let her talk to him. We don't have anyone here that I know that will do that, but the victim needs to understand they're not at fault. They have a right. I don't care what ugly names they want to call their abuser. That's fine. If they want to use the F word in counseling, I say fine. It doesn't offend me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how ugly words they have to use.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. That's how they're going to heal, is being angry. And I call it justified revenge in the counseling book. We need to let them have justification for being mad.
Yeah.
And I let them describe how they want to kill a guy.
Mm-hmm.
My fantasy was tying my ex-husband's feet to the corral post, going out the driveway, hooking a tractor and fish hooks to him, driving off.
Oh, wow.
We need a way for women to express what needs to be done.
Mm.
And I know that shocks you, but we need, I'm very mild. But I've learned you have to have ways.
Shocking coming from a minister, yes.
Well, I had a program in Idaho. If you wanted to graduate from counseling with what I did, I had I had bull calves, I had lambs, and I had goats.
Yeah.
And they had to castrate one or the other to graduate.
Oh, wow.
I had one woman, she was 44 when her dad raped her. He'd raped 34 members of the family. This is through a Pentecost Church of God case that I worked on.
She was 44, is that what you said?
And he raped her in a motel.
Wow.
And had raped all of her children. And she was so angry. A lot of problems that we've talked about in her life.
Yeah.
And she said, I want to be free. I want to get over this.
Yeah.
And I worked with her. I took her camping. I did things. I work with the ladies I work with now. I'll do whatever it takes to help them. And when she tried to castrate she wanted to do a steer. So I tied him up, hog-tied him and tied him down, and weighed about 200 or 300 pounds, good size. She wanted that because she thought he was about the size of her dad.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. And I had that steer hog-tied and roped. Poor thing was laying there. She got the knife. I sterilized everything. And she reached down, started to cut, and passed out. I brought her to, and she jumped up. I had smelling salts. Got her up. She said, give me that knife. She made a cut, fainted again. Got back up. She said, give me that knife. I'm going to make Dad be sorry that I've learned how to do this. And she finished the castration process. And she stood up, threw that knife, put her hands up there and started dancing around. She said, I can do it if he tries it again. And she had a measure of recovery. I was so proud of her.
Yeah.
And I do offbeat things because I knew that's what helped me.
Right. Well, you would know because it's your experience.
If it helped me, it'll help somebody else.
Right. When we first started, you said that you were glad that your dad had passed away and he's dead now. What about that makes you, I don't know, I guess
I know according to Romans 1:18-32 that he is waiting the judgment of God. And my mother and brother also, and my 3 uncles. They chose, and that's comforting. I don't fear anymore. I know that I believe in hell, and I believe they're there in waiting judgment, and that they'll be cast into the lake of fire after the great white throne judgment. Wow. And my belief, I try to work with people in whatever faith they are, and I do not put my faith belief on the people that I work with, because they may come from a total different background. And if I can't understand that background, I'm going to wound them, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And as a chaplain, I've worked in the hospitals, and I don't care what faith, if whatever it was, I called a pastor of that faith to come, because that was not my job. I could have prayer with them, and did every time that I was there. I went every day of the week and volunteered 4 hours a day for a long time in our local hospital. And then when I pastored, I did the same thing. And I've had women to come out of the community and say, my husband raped them, right out in public, start angry. I went to the churches I pastored, had one lady stand up and say, I've been mad for 25 years. And I said, I'm so sorry. And she said, I need to say, I forgive you. I held out my arms. She runs up to the front of the church and hugs me. And that's what it's about. It's not about me. I'm not important if I can help somebody else heal.
Mm-hmm.
Let them say what they need to say. I can sit there and listen, but it's them. They're the important person in recovery, because I want them to become survivors and have a good life.
Yeah.
Because I have. And it's been a pleasant journey. I came back to Arkansas in 2006, and I've tried to think of anything and everything. And I've went and spent time and let people come and talk, and to tell them, I know, I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yes, he did it. I believe it. And I'm glad you're able to tell me about it. And I went out to his grave. I hadn't been back long, went after dark, so I wouldn't embarrass anybody. And I sat down and used the potty on his grave. That was my way of saying, I'm above ground. I've recovered. You didn't win. And I said it out loud to him. And I left a letter on his grave before decoration for other people to read in the community. The church I pastored let me come in and talk to the church. And a lot of my kids that were little when I was pastoring, they told me about him coming to the church, and the church turned their back on him, and he went out the door. They wouldn't shake. They shunned him.
Yeah.
He kept coming, and they shunned him, and he never come back. They let him know, we know what you are and what you've done, and we believe Cae. We know she's telling the truth.
Right.
And the men in the community were very supportive of me doing what I did, even though I was in Idaho. They said they knew what my ex-husband was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an idiot. I take full responsibility. It is my responsibility that he was given access to 3 children. And I own that, and I've worked hard to help them recover. I don't have any guilt left, because I know I wasn't guilty of anything. And there's only, as I said, I've set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to. They have a justified right to be angry. And they can live in their anger. I feel bad, but it's their loss.
Mm-hmm.
And they've not healed as long as they're mad and angry. They've never healed.
Right.
And we let go of our anger. And as we heal, we become free. As I said, we take back our real estate. The ground that was stolen from us, we take it back. And that's why I'm fighting. I'm going to help fight, hopefully change the laws in Arkansas. That we, the victims of Arkansas abuse, we can have our real estate back and live as free women and men.
With these, the women that you've helped and going through those, like the castration exercises or the, fantasizing of what you would do to your abuser, are you a believer of the death penalty?
Yes.
Okay.
I was not. And after this happened, and when I taught in the prison, I believe the death penalty is warranted. Rape increased so much percentage after the death penalty was removed. From that used to be a death penalty. You raped, you got the death penalty. And when that was taken away, it just went rampant, because there's nothing to stop. There's no fear.
Mm-hmm.
And inmates need to fear. And if it's known in prison that a child has been raped, they're harmed badly. But what is bad in prison, there's also the men who prey on the vulnerable there, the young inmates.
Yes.
My youngest inmate I taught was 13 years old, in there for life for murder in gangs. We had 9 or 10 gangs in the prison. And they carried on inside. And, of course, outside ask them, and they put out stuff. For those things you see on TV shows are real. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing pretty about prison. But the thing we've politicized prisons and farmed them out to the richest companies that can run them. They're basically under guidelines, but without government control, used to be.
Right.
And I don't see that as a good thing.
No.
I think it's good business to build bigger and better prisons and fill them up. It's cost effective for the companies that build them. And there's no counseling in the prison.
Right.
There's no, our goal should be rehabilitation for those who are deemed rehabilitable, but not all are.
But that doesn't apply to, well, obviously, sex offenders, but specifically,
if they
pedophiles.
own their crime, if they actually honestly own it, and they've went through therapy and will continue that. If they're going to come out, they need to be under therapy once a week for the rest of their life, accountable to someone and working and toward being never touching another child and having remorse.
Right.
They can look you in the eye and lie with the best of them. I mean, abuse creates liars. Liars do the abuse. I mean, they're fantastic manipulators. Oh, they make you feel like the most special person in the world.
Everyone that I've met, because like it's, before this year, sex offenders were usually got the lightest sentences.
Yes.
A lot of the times, drug sentences or like manufacturing meth or whatever, they got heftier sentences than, having sex with a minor. But the ones that I've, met since coming out, like they all have the same, a very, very similar demeanor to me. Or like you just said, like they know how to be manipulative, or maybe they're just afraid to rock the boat or whatever it is. A lot of them are very intelligent.
Smartest men in prison.
But they'll speak to you in the calmest tones.
Yes.
And they don't want
to modulated voice.
Cae, I just want you to consider this, and you can take this with a grain of salt, but and like they'll just come at you like that. And
I encounter that as a licensed contractor here in the state of Arkansas.
Really?
Yes. And I help anyone that's been taken advantage of by an unscrupulous, usually unlicensed, uninsured man here in Arkansas. Recently just worked a case in my area and I'm still helping the couple. This dude stole $155,000 from them cash.
Wow. And
the house has to be torn down. And the contractors board fined the dude $36,000. And now he's filed for bankruptcy. And these people, the guy is a disabled veteran. Everything slammed in his face, stole.
Wow.
And I've encountered this several times. And that's something that the legislation has taken the power away from the contractors board to be able to get these guys.
Wow.
I mean, I think all their tools need to be confiscated, their vehicles, everything confiscated, their home. I don't care if they got a wife and kids. They did this crime. It's not the victims go through much the same as domestic violence and sexual abuse victims. The same kind of PTSD, disassociation, the wish to either commit suicide or kill.
Yeah.
And these are things that I'm hoping that the state legislature will look at and evaluate. I'd like to see some teeth given back to the contractor's office. We've got a wonderful contractors board, but unless they've got the power to do and regulate, I mean, I pay for my license every year. And even though I'm old, I'm not building right at this point, but I keep them up. And I'll help it. I try to help. It's all. I had so many, Ty, that believed me, that helped me. I had a teacher would help me in school and help me wash my clothes, taught me how to act, got me books on manners. And I had another teacher wanting to adopt me, and my dad said $500. Shocked her so bad. She was so horrified, and she was afraid of him. And I mean, I had countless people through the years who've helped me that's reached a hand out. And if I don't reach a hand back out, I'm not worth anything.
It goes back, just like the ownership what you were talking about earlier, because like he literally bought all you kids for $350 and was willing to sell you for $500 and To him, that's a profit. He's just selling property.
That's it. I was his property.
That's
and,
crazy.
I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but he had a $750 bounty on my head till he died in 2014 in a nursing home in Fayetteville. He wants. I sent him the book, the first book I wrote. He threw it in the stove, and I said the second book, Redbird Phoenix, and I was told he ripped it in half. And one of the workers at the nursing home has filled me in on what his actions were. They have an obsessive, compulsive nature.
Mm-hmm.
They're obsessed with their victims. He was obsessed with my body. So I thought my body was bad because I didn't have any privacy whatsoever between him and my mother with my body. And children need privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I didn't ever get.
Right.
And that's why it's hard. That's why I have agoraphobia. I understand that. It's from the violation and the need. If I just had the place to be safe, I'd have been safe.
Yeah.
That was a fantasy, but, that's what causes a lot of people have agoraphobia from trauma.
Right.
And I face mine, and most of the time I can speak in front of hundreds of people, and my knees don't knock together too loudly. And that I know you, it's very easy to do an interview with you, Ty. And I
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I try to make it easy, more natural.
Yes, you do.
I know we've gone long, but I definitely want to end this with asking you, because you proposed a few things here, but what is a long-term solution that we could implement for recovery of victims that have been in your situation?
Bring it, hopefully, I think UMAS is working on developing a good psychiatric training program. We need professionals trained in all this trauma that I've endured, that I've talked about, that's in my counseling book. I've got solutions for it. And several of the doctors have asked for the book, and I've given it to them. We need certified people that meet the court standard, the legal, legislative standard to deal with victims. That John Doe prosecutor can call Jane Doe investigative trained forensic doctor in rape and abuse, have them do exam and know it's going to hold up in court, that there is no excuse and that there's no way for a perp to get out of trouble. Then they'll plead guilty, give them 15 to life, 20 years. Give them enough time that the young victim can grow up, be out of high school in at least 21, that she can have time to adjust to him being back in society, and that she gets counseling all those years.
Of course.
And that there's counseling out there available. Also, I'd like to mention that, people could find my books on Amazon.com.
That's where I was going next, was like, where can we find your books?
Just type in Cae Cordell, CAE Cordell books, and my books will pop up. And if you live close to where I live, I sell them at basically a little over cost for people so they can have access to them. And if it's a law firm, I'll give you the books free to use in court, the counseling book.
Wow. I
don't mind a bit. I could donate that little amount and help you win a case. I'll help work with your victims. You have to pay my gas money. I speak anywhere in Arkansas as long as I have someone that drives me. I don't ask for anything for my time, but I ask for gas money so that when he takes me to there and back, that he's not out any money. He donates his time to help. And I figure, if I can get his gas money, I speak to any church, I speak to men group individually, and I speak very plainly. And I do not speak to a congregation with children in it. They have to be over 18. It's I will not traumatize the children.
Right.
They don't need to hear what I have to say. And I speak on Army bases. I've been cleared to do that. Spoke at Arkadelphia on the Army base there. And there's so much trauma out there. And there's so many men and women going to the service who've been traumatized. And then they experience further trauma, and their PTSD is so severe. And it's basically not their fault. But they love their country. And I love my community, my state, my country enough. That's why I'm doing this. It's my only way that I can fight back. And I'm willing to keep doing it.
Sorry, I turned it on Do Not Disturb, but there we go. Yeah, There we go.
But no, they can find my website at Cae Cordell.com. And I've got a lot of interviews on there. Go on YouTube. You can type my name in. And my name, I've got a lot of interviews, blogs, programs that's been put up on there. But this last year, I've done a lot, and I really appreciate it. We're trying to get the word out.
Yeah, looks like you're doing a good job, and like you're getting enough outreach, and that's only growing. I think as people become more aware of your story and what you're doing, the work you're doing. I've never heard anybody else, do it on the level that you're doing. So like, I really appreciate what you're,
But it's taken years.
Of course it has.
It's a process.
Yeah. And
I'm willing to share. In Idaho, I worked with 3 or 4 local police departments, let them question me. Why did I leave? Governor told me I was the first woman that left and never went back in the state of Idaho that he knew of. And I can let them question me and willing to work. Let them pick my brain. There's no questions off limits. I try to answer everything, and if I'm uncomfortable, I'll say so. But I just want to be an avenue or I say a jug of water that they can stick, take a drink from and say, hey,
right.
Let us learn.
Yeah.
And I've still got that teacher in me. I love teaching, and I'm willing to do that. Any church that wants to learn, I'm willing to, go and do what I can, as long as my health permits.
Right.
I walk on peg legs. I'm teasing. I had knee surgery a little 4 months ago, and I'm recovering from that. But I'm determined, as long as I've got breath in my body, I'll keep fighting. So if you see me with, my hair half pulled out, using a stick to find my way, I'm still going to fight.
Still working on it.
I'm still working on it.
Nothing's going to stop you. Okay, thank you so much for stopping by and for telling your story.
It's been a joy.
Spreading this message out. Hopefully, it gets to as many people as possible, because we need to know about what you're doing. And a lot of people are out there are living in that same situation you were in, or for something very similar, that needs to hear, hey, I can get out of this, and this isn't my fault, and there's going to be a lot to work through as well.
Well, as I said before, my hope came through my trust and accepting Jesus as my Savior at age 11.
Right.
And if I hadn't have had God to hang on to, I wouldn't be here today. His grace has been sufficient for me. And again, I can't stress enough, God trusts us to walk through this abuse. And that's to tell our story and to fight. So I'm going to hang on. I know he'll keep trusting me because I'm going to keep fighting. I have come to no point that I can stand down and not fight.
He's got your mental real estate.
I own my mental real estate. 100%. It's paid for.
It's paid for.
Yes. No and loans. I put a sign up, no trespassing.
I love it. Thank you, Cae.
You're welcome, dear.
If you are watching this on YouTube, you can find the audio version of this podcast on any of your favorite platforms that you like to listen to your podcasts on, from Amazon to iCloud, Apple. Oh, there's so many of them. I've got like 50 different platforms that we're on, and it's hard to keep up with all of them. But if you're listening to the audio version, you can also find us on YouTube. Just search for Longterm, a podcast in recovery. And until next episode, we will see you later. Thank you.